My name is Dan Keshet. I am a co-founder of an urbanist organization in Austin known as Aura. And I blog at austinonyourfeet.wordpress.com. And if there's one thing that I want you to get out of hearing me talk tonight, it's that an ordinary person, not just me, but all of my friends in Austin, can come together into political organizations even without a background and without a training, and make an enormous difference in the politics of a city and in the problems that Will is talking about. And so I'm just going to give a little bit of background on Austin. I don't know how much you guys know. These are the two maps on the same scale. Thank you, Raphael. We have San Francisco, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with. The map on the right and the map on the left is Austin. As you can see, the geographic extent of Austin includes, way more than the geographic extent of San Francisco. Just so you have an idea of what people are talking about when they're talking about Austin, a very large landmass. Next slide. Austin is growing. This is a population. It starts at about 1990. We've got 3 cities I've lived in plus San Francisco. Austin is in the blue, and it early on passed Seattle in the yellow, and then Boston in the red, and then in the last couple of years it passed San Francisco. So it's actually a larger city by population than San Francisco. And so you might ask, and I think Austin has a large reputation for its growth around the country. I'm not sure whether you've heard or whether these kinds of graphs have been seen, but you might ask why, what is the problem then? If Austin is building the housing stock that is allowing it to grow like this, then what is the problem? Next slide. And this is really the problem that we face in Austin, which is it's a sort of another manifestation of the problem that you have in San Francisco. And so what you see is the urban core, with the more green is the census tracts that have gained in population from 2000 to 2010, and the more red are the census tracts that have lost population. And what you can see is that the sort of the center of the city, which is as large as San Francisco itself, has largely lost population between 2000 and 2010. And those are the central core neighborhoods that are the older neighborhoods, the neighborhoods where people can walk, the neighborhoods where transit goes. And most of our new housing, most of this fantastic growth, there has been some downtown, and there has been a few on transit corridors, but for the most part it's really at the periphery of the city, something that would be far outside the city in San Francisco. Next slide. And why? This is the main reason why. I don't expect you to be able to read it, but the colors are enough. This is a zoning map of Austin, and in the yellow is single-family only zoning. In the purple is industrial. In the red is commercial. And the brown, which I don't know if you can see anywhere, there, thank you, Raphael. The brown is multifamily. So the vast majority of land mass in Austin is zoned single family only, and most of the rest of it is industrial or commercial or government. Next slide. And just for last presentation, just to remind you of the vast differences between living in Texas and living in San Francisco or New York. This is the transit mode share of commute. And so, New York is its own city and has a crazy transit mode share. San Francisco has a, pretty large one, and Austin is down there at 4%. Pretty much everybody in Austin drives single occupancy vehicles to work. All right, you can cut that. All right, so that is Austin. And now I want to talk about our group, my group that I co-founded. A friend of mine, I invited a bunch of us to start. And it started out on Twitter. It started out just with a bunch of people, ordinary people who were not not, politically connected. They weren't necessarily planners. They weren't necessarily, people who had a ton of modeling experience, but they knew that there was something going wrong. And so we talked, we actually started out focusing on a transit plan. It was not on housing. It was focusing on a transit plan, and we didn't feel the transit planning was going right, and we formed an organization. And over the course of about a year, we realized that we have a larger vision, a sort of larger shared vision of what it means to be a city, what it means to be urban. And as you can see, Austin is, a very different place than San Francisco. And so we formed an organization around the vision of a welcoming city. And so for us, a welcoming city meant transportation that anybody could take. It meant housing for anybody who wished to live there. If you want to live in the city, then you should find a place here. And it meant, freedom to make your own choices about a lot of things. We have occupancy limits of if you want to live with unrelated adults, then you should be allowed to do it. And if you want to, drive a taxi, you should be allowed to do it. And so this was really, the center of our vision, and it has taken off. I'm going to sort of go through some of the accomplishments we've had, just to sort of not really just say, oh, this is so amazing, but just to say it's something that can happen. We're a small group of committed people, and it's, since the time we've started, we made a really big impression on the debate about deregulation of the vehicle for hire market. So bringing Uber and Lyft, which were illegal in the city of Austin, that we were part of the debate that brought them there. And I think most importantly, we've really changed the conversation when it comes to housing. And I think that the way that we've changed the conversation is in a lot of ways just through the messaging. I'm going to start with, we have discussions of supply and demand. We talk about it a little bit differently. Of course, we believe in supply and demand. This is something that, economists, have studied for a long, long time. But sometimes we've come up with a model we call the musical chairs model of the housing market, which is just to say that in the same way that when you play musical chairs, rather than focusing on if you have 100 people playing musical chairs and there's only 90 chairs out there, rather than focusing on what are the attributes of the 10 people who failed to get a chair at the end. Are these people the slowest people? Are these the people with poor eyesight because they, got there? And rather than saying, well, then we need, what we really, really need to see is chairs designed specifically for these people, what we say is, if there's 100 people and 90 chairs, no matter what, there's going to be 10 people who are missing out. And if, I think the analogy should be obvious for housing, but this is the basics of being a welcoming city, of being a city that doesn't, and I know that San Francisco, I know just from walking around here that there is some massive unwelcomingness. I've seen, some of the stickers and graffiti of telling people to get out. And in Austin, it's the same way. It's actually Californians that they tell to get out. It's also Californian developers. That's what people blame all new housing that they don't like. They say, oh, it's California developers are bringing this here. And so, to us, we want a welcoming city. We want a city that says if there's 100 people who want to sit down, then we need to provide 100 chairs. And if there's not enough chairs, then make some more. And it doesn't really matter to a great extent whether you're building thrones or whether you're building folding chairs or love seats. It does matter in the end, and you do pick, but all of the chairs help. All of the chairs matter if someone is sitting in them, and all of the housing matters. We've also talked, in the same vein, we've talked about abundant housing. And we talk about this sometimes rather than emphasizing affordable housing. And in part, it's just a surrender, because the term affordable housing is so tied up with the concept of subsidized housing that it just becomes difficult when we say we want more affordable housing. It becomes difficult for most people to even understand that as a demand for housing that people can afford, rather than necessarily a demand for, a program that provides housing that people can afford. And so what we focused on is abundant housing, that's saying it's not just about finding the people who are priced out and providing specifically housing for them. It's about finding enough housing to house people, to house everybody. And so in Austin, we happen to be going through right now a land development code rewrite, a rewrite of all of our zoning code. And so we've been very involved in becoming a stakeholder at these organizational meetings where we talk about things like that map of single-family only zoning, as well as height limits and FAR restrictions and all of the things that go into preventing housing from being built. And we've talked about everything down to little bitty projects that, while you're talking about 40-story buildings, we're talking about 450 square foot ADUs, accessory dwelling units, granny flats, mother-in-law apartments, secondary units. They go by all sorts of different names. And loosening the parking restrictions and the driveway requirements and the parking requirements that go into that are required right now in order to build an ADU. And we've also talked about bringing micro units, although everything is bigger in Texas, so the notion of a micro unit is 500 square feet and not 250. Austin has the same problems that San Francisco does, writ very small. San Francisco, the rent here is, I believe I compared with my high school friend when I got here, and she had purchased her place for 7 times the dollar per square footage that I had bought mine. And so the problems in San Francisco are huge. And I think that I could understand if for some of you that was a little bit overwhelming and you're saying, I can't believe how big a problem we have to face. But I think that you should also know that because of that, it's really the whole world is watching what you guys are doing. This organization, any impact you can have, the whole world is saying, if you can make a difference, in this market, and you can really make a change here, it's going to be an inspiration across the country and really across the world, because this is a landmark housing market, and you guys have landmark problems. So that's really it, and thank you for having me.